Today on Inspired Money.
That was going to mean a risk. It was going to mean that I might not earn the amount of money. It might mean big life changes. And I thought about it enough to say, I'm prepared to pay the cost for that. Mm-hmm. If that's what it means, I'm prepared to pay the cost. If it means we have to tighten the budget or sell something, I'll do it. Because that's actually what I want. And so I put that out. I put it out to my manager. I did write it in terms of an email, and I did put it to my agents, and then I just kept hoping. I put it out there and kept hoping.
This is episode 7 with Golden Globe nominated actor Linus Roache. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for tuning in. You'll find today's show notes and guest links at inspiredmoney.fm/007. Inspired Money is brought to you by my company, Runnymede Capital Management, a fiduciary investment advisor. We help individuals, families, and companies with their investments and retirement accounts, including 401k plans. Educate yourself for free by subscribing to our blog at inspiredmoney.fm.
Want to do a camera rehearsal or you want to try it? All right, guys, we're going to try a picture on this. Let's get everybody one, please. All right, guys, pictures up.
Pictures up.
Pictures up.
Let's roll sound.
Rolling.
Rolling.
Sound speeds.
Camera speeds. 2. Awesome. Take 2. Mark.
Set. And action.
Great acting begins when an actor is so believable that we forget we're watching an actor acting. The sincerity of the performance is so convincing that we accept them as the character that they're portraying. It doesn't feel like rehearsed lines. It's honest. It makes us care. It compels us to want to see what will happen next. Now, I am not an actor, but I'm told that when you play a character in theater, TV, or film, you should know your character as well as you know yourself, so you can just exist and live. It's easier said than done. But that's how you make it feel like real life. Our guest today can do just that. He's performed on stage, on television, and on the big screen. You may recognize him as Executive ADA Michael Cutter on Law & Order and SVU, or Dr. Thomas Wayne from Batman Begins. Now, don't embarrass yourself by saying Batman Returns. Yes, I totally did that. Today's guest was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for playing Robert F. Kennedy in RFK. More recently, he was King Egbert in the History Channel series Vikings, and he's currently filming Season 7 of Homeland, where he plays White House Chief of Staff David Wellington. In this episode, you'll learn how to prepare for a performance. I think even the non-actors can benefit from these insights and routines, because really, isn't life just one big performance? How you shouldn't tie your self-worth to your work? We'll explore all sorts of things like wealth, fulfillment, and happiness. Linus is not just a great actor, but after hitting many of his professional goals by age 30, he began to wonder if this is it. He took a break and explored the spiritual aspects of life that included meditating for at least 2 hours a day. So we'll explore this too. I think it's totally relevant because being healthy includes physical health, mental health, spiritual health, and financial health. I have so much fun every time I talk to Linus, and today is no exception. Let's get inspired with Linus Roache. Linus, thank you so much for joining me on Inspired Money. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure, Andy. Thanks for asking me. Yeah,
I'd like to start out, if you're ready just to jump right in, I'd like to start with the first question. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Well, I think it was. I do remember being very attracted to it. As a kid, I remember being quite sort of possessive at an early age and calling it. I knew the difference between paper money and coins, and I wanted the paper monies, as I called them. I wanted more paper monies because I knew they were of greater value. So that's one of my earliest memories. And then also, I think with Monopoly, I managed to get hold of the Monopoly money, and I used to really like holding on to that. So, and the other thing I remember is from quite an early age, I wanted to be independent with my money. I remember the pocket money I'd get in the UK. It was like 50 pence. So that's probably the equivalent of, oh God, what is it now? I mean, it was actually nowadays a fair amount, probably about a few dollars. But that was my pocket money for the week. And I remember thinking, well, I don't want to be reliant on my parents giving me this money. I want to find ways to make my own money. So I started cutting lawns, painting windows, picking tomatoes, doing all kinds of things to get my own money that then I could buy stuff that I would own. So that's one of my earliest memories, going from early childhood through to early teens.
Interesting. And that it was all self-motivated, that you wanted to be entrepreneurial and make some extra cash.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it entrepreneurial. It was quite sort of traditional. It was, I wanted to go out, earn a wage, have my own money, and not be beholden to anybody else. I wanted to be independent. And I do remember someone saying once, neither a borrower nor a lender be, quotes from Shakespeare. And that sort of stuck in my head. Of course, in life, I've gone on to do both. But at that point in my childhood, it was like, I want to be free and know that what I have is my own. And it wasn't entrepreneurial in that I was out there creating little mini businesses, but I was willing to work, and I was willing to put in the hours and get paid the money for the hours.
At that young age, did you have specific ways that you wanted to spend that money, or were you saving that money?
I would do a bit of both. I was saving, and then, it was even things like cigarettes and girls, spending money on buying presents for girlfriends and things like that. But I had a post office account at a very early age, which was like, literally had about sort of £50 in it. But I was very proud of seeing the stamps go in every time I would take a bit of cash, and it would build up.
I'm impressed. You were a very mature young man.
Yeah, well, maybe it was maturity. I think some of those ethics came from my mother. She was an actress, but she also was quite diligent in these areas. And we had a nanny. My parents divorced when I was 10. And I lived with my sister and my mother, and she was a nanny, but she was almost a part of our family. And she lived with us and cared for us. And she had very, very traditional, almost Victorian values, a very wholesome, God-fearing woman. And, she sort of gave me a lot of the ethics and the principles, I think, that mattered to me. Interestingly enough, my sister, who was only 3 years younger, had a completely different relationship to money. She had no problem borrowing from anybody and everybody and not paying people back, and has consequently gone on, to never really have her own job and build her own life in that way, and has become reliant on others, which is kind of fascinating that the two of us would grow up in the same environment and have two very different responses.
Well, that nature versus nurture debate is always there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but what I find interesting is that looking at your relationship to money from a very young age, right, sort of provides a little clue into how that can develop into adulthood. So listeners are certainly hearing your accent. You have a very extensive acting credits list. I recall seeing you as, I think you were on Batman Returns and
Batman Begins.
Batman
actually.
Begins. There are too many Batmans at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
So Batman Begins, that's right. And you played, I think, Bruce Wayne's father.
Yeah, Thomas Wayne. That's correct. Yeah.
And people may know you from Law and Order, playing the character of the DA.
Yeah.
Many people are surprised that you are English and that you have an English accent, because watching you on American TV, you portray an American very well.
Well, thank you for that, Andy. And probably one of the only ways I can, get work in the US, because there aren't that. It's been very interesting for me. I've always had an affinity with America. I've always been attracted to it. And the opportunity arose, life circumstances arose for me to come and try and live here. And I was fortunate to do it at a time when my career was in a place where my work, if you like, wasn't dependent upon me staying in one place or being in the UK. I was being offered work in Canada and all over the world, really. So my wife and I decided to try and live here. And we grew to love it. And obviously I grew to gravitate towards wanting to work here more because I wanted to stay in the country. And so things have developed from there. Interestingly enough, now, many years later, I'm kind of interested in being able to go back to the UK. And I went back this year and did a TV series. And it was really nice. It's been really nice to go back and work with my fellow countrymen and play an Englishman. And, it's great. And I feel very fortunate and lucky that I'm able to straddle both sides of the Atlantic like that,
That's very cool. Well, the world is certainly getting smaller and smaller every day.
It is.
Linus, can we take a step back?
Yeah.
Acting is very much in your blood. You mentioned that your mother,
yes,
an actress. I know that your father is a very well-known actor in the UK.
Yes.
Can you talk about your youth and how you've been surrounded by actors.
Yes.
And how you got into acting, and a little bit about that process.
Yes, sure. Yes, well, as you say, I definitely grew up in an acting family, and it was they were both very successful in very different ways. My father in a very popular, probably the first ever soap opera, and he's still in it, by the way, at the age of 85.
It's
playing
incredible.
The same character, for 54 years or so.
Wow.
And my mother more in the avant-garde, cutting-edge world of BBC dramas and cutting-edge material. So she was a very highly respected actor. And I grew up in this environment of sort of bohemian, creative, interesting people all around me. Some of them a little crazy and would drink a lot, and there would be wild parties and lots of, if you like, sort of madness around. But it was also, very exciting. But interestingly, when I went to school, because of my parents, there was a pressure on me to be in school plays, for example. Mm-hmm. And I really pushed back against it. And I didn't like being forced to do something. But I do remember this one time. There was a school I was at. I was probably at about the age of 9 or 10, I think. And this teacher got us to do this little exercise. It was like an improvisation. And I remember launching myself into this improvisation of playing a kid who didn't want to go to school. Mm-hmm. And I was so immersed in it immediately. And what happened was I could feel everybody in the room responding to what I was doing. I knew that they got the state that I was in. It was making them laugh. They were connected to me in it. And I remember having the penny dropped in that moment. Oh my God. This is something I can do. This is something I can excel at, something I can be good at. Mm-hmm. And the opportunity arose to do little bits of child acting through my parents, actually, and my dad's show. And then I got a little part in the Oneidin Line, which was a TV drama through the BBC. And I did those, and I loved it. I absolutely just felt completely at home. It excited me. It thrilled me. And then again, I went on to school, and there was more pressure to be in plays, and I was pushing back against it. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, it became clear that this was the path I wanted to follow, but I wanted to do it very seriously. And so I became quite dedicated to the fact that I was going to get through school, and then I was going to get to drama school as quick as I could. And I was very hungry. I mean, my mother was, being an actress, she was a little dramatic sometimes. She had this theory that the theater might not exist anymore, that film was going to take over and video was going to take over and there'd be no theater left. So I was like in a race to get out there as a professional actor before the theater was dead.
Yeah.
And, I basically applied for drama school when I was 16, and they said, so you're just too young. So eventually I went on and did a little bit more not higher education, but sort of college education, high school really, equivalent in England. And it was there in boarding school that I felt the first time I started to do school plays, because I was away from home in a boarding school. I had 2 years before I was going to be able to go to drama school, and I started to do little plays at school, and I won a few awards. And I went to the National Youth Theatre of Great Britain. I had a place there for a summer, and then I got myself into drama school, and kind of the rest is history, really. I just was very, very dedicated, focused, and I kind of had belief in myself, but at the same time, I was always wary of it's really hard and you can't take anything for granted, and I'll be very lucky if I get a job. And so I had a sort of mixture of both, which is probably reflects the reality of the business. You never really do know if you're going to get another job.
That is a very challenging part of your business.
Yes.
Not knowing and not being in control of your fate in many ways.
That's absolutely true. I
mean, as a kid, I understand the resistance or pushback, right, to following that path, because that was your parents' path.
Yes.
That commitment, when did that disappear? Was that a process, or do you think it happened like in a specific moment?
The commitment to what?
The commitment to learn about acting, to go down that road, to go to study theater and acting, and no longer have that resistance anymore.
Well, no, the resistance really was to being, it's a bit like the relationship to money, not wanting to be beholden to anybody else.
Right.
I wanted my own money. I wanted my own career, my own ownership of my craft. I didn't want to be defined as the son of these two actors.
Yeah.
I really was worried that it was going to be seen as nepotism, that I would only be valued because I was the son of my father, or that kind of thing. So once I realized that I had it in me, and it's what I loved and it's what I wanted, I kind of followed my mother's lead on go for the classics, the traditional path towards understanding the craft of acting through theater. And that's when I started reading lots of Shakespeare and wanting to do Shakespeare and getting myself to drama school. So it was very clear. It was more that the resistance was, because just to put in context for a moment, my father's success will probably not be appreciated by many of the listeners because he was in the UK and still is.
Right.
But it was literally a beginning of what you could call celebrity. He was one of the first actors to become known in people's living rooms. That in a way that it was almost the fame shot to the level of the Beatles in a sense, because everybody watched the show. There were only 2 channels when it was on, and it was on twice a week, and everybody went home at 7 o'clock at night to sit down and watch it. And he was a young, good-looking, he was the sort of juvenile lead, and his fame was pretty extraordinary. And I remember going to events with him, and people were screaming and clamoring to touch him, and it was like rock star status. And although I sort of liked the world of that in one way, I needed to separate myself from that and wanted to be my own man. So it was tricky, because at the beginning of my career, I was making choices that would define myself in very different terms to my father, and yet the publicity that would come my way would often be Linus Roache, the son of William Roache.
Right.
It would always be Coronation Street star son, was the headline, not Linus Roache's wonderful performance of such and such.
Right.
So this was really me trying to find myself, and I suppose it's just a natural part of becoming a man, and it took me a while to get over it and say, well, it's what the hell, it's not a problem. And I'd actually worked with my father in his show for a little bit as a kid, and it was wonderful. And I went back many years later.
You did that when you were 11?
I did that when I was 11, and then an interesting thing happened. There was a certain anniversary period. I can't remember. It must have been the 30th, maybe. And I'd just been out of drama school, and they offered me the role of his son again in the show. And I could have gone back and had a long contract, but I had to say no, because I couldn't, for the very reasons I just said. I needed my own career. I needed my own journey, and so I didn't do that. I'm very glad I didn't. But many, many years later, at the 50th anniversary, we actually cooked up the idea of me going into the show as his now long-lost other son.
Wow.
Which you can get away with on a soap opera.
You could have all kinds of storylines.
Exactly.
You could die 3 times and come back.
Exactly. And maybe I am going to come back. So we actually did get to go and do that, and it was great fun, and we did it with my half brother as well, and I'm looking forward to going back again. I'm sure we'll cook up another opportunity.
What a unique family reunion.
It was a family reunion, exactly. So I think really, it was really about just wanting to define myself rather than being defined by them. That was the movement in me.
Yeah, independence in your career, and it's just like
right.
part of your financial independence.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Linus, what was it like growing up with your father's celebrity?
Well, it was both sort of interesting and exciting, and often frustrating, because I didn't like the limelight. Right. To be honest, I mean, you couldn't go anywhere with him without people sort of hounding him, and you couldn't walk down the street without being recognized, and so my parents, they were very different types of actors, and I suppose I gravitated. I very close to my mum, and I really appreciated her talent, and I went more in her direction and followed her lead, if you like. But over years now, and now being very close to my dad later in life, I really admire, appreciate, and love what he has done, and also really respect his attitude, which is something I'm learning from now. He's defying age by basically not relating to age, and he still goes to work as an actor, playing the same role, but he goes with a freshness. He's going to do his best to try and be better than he's ever been before, and he really gives himself to the work beautifully, and I take it as a great life lesson, his whole attitude. And he's had to ride some very difficult storms in his life, multiple events that have been very deeply challenging to him, but he's managed to embrace them all and let them be, and have the courage to sort of stay in the middle of the storm and see it through and come out the other side. And he's very grateful for what he has, and he's very generous and very beloved because of that. So he has a beautiful attitude that I think I'm embracing as I'm getting older in life as well. I'm sort of embracing more of that same attitude.
Yeah, can we dig into that just a little bit? I mean,
sure.
I'm hearing that it's very inspirational, the fact that he's been on this show for as long as he's been playing the same character. I think many actors would never want that role for such a long time, because they feel like they're not able to do new things and venture into new territories.
Absolutely.
But like you said, there's a metaphor to an approach to life. Is it a positivity? Or
Definitely.
What are some of the key points when you look at his approach to his career and going through difficult times in his personal life? What are the key factors that you see?
Yeah, good question. I mean, he has an innate trust, I think, in the fact that life, he sees it as good, wholesome, and there is a spiritual element to him. He's not sort of overtly explicit about it, but he's always had a sort of, I suppose, a respect for and a connection to the deeper dimensions of life. And he lives, I think, by some very simple sort of adages. He tries to be just good to other people, to give. And he's also able to let things go. I mean, when I say that, I mean, life throws everything at you, and are you able to just actually bear it in all of its intensity, meaning all of the pain and the sorrow and the joy, and just let it all be? And he's he's very trusting, and even as he's got older, right now, for example, would you believe it? After all these years, he's up against it financially because the equivalent of the IRS are after him, and he has to deal with all of that, and it's challenging for him. But he has this very philosophical, life is full of abundance, and I look forward to more abundance, and what will be will be. And so he's very humble, I suppose, really deep down. It's a humility in the face of it all that is won over time, but I think he's also had some of it in him as a person his whole life. And basically, people always talk of him as a very kind man. He wouldn't want to hurt anybody, and that is very much who he is and how he lives.
You mentioned that that's influencing you as you get older. Like, what kind of changes have you made in your life?
Changes I've made in my life. Well, I mean, I've made a lot of changes in my life. I mean, one thing I'm looking back on now and saying, well, I wasn't scared to take a few risks. I mean, I set out to be an actor. I had certain goals, if you like. I was fearful that I wouldn't achieve them, but I look back, and by the age of 30, I'd actually hit and ticked a lot of the boxes that I'd wanted to achieve. I had had a major TV show. I'd had a movie that had gone international. I was being invited to Hollywood and doing all of that. I'd done lead roles at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I'd been on the West End. I'd actually done a lot. And then I had a crisis moment around about the age of 30 where I thought, well, is this really it? Is this it for me, that basically I just keep on doing this, having more success and more of these things? And I started to feel like it wasn't going to be enough for me, to be honest. So that's when I got interested personally in the spiritual aspect of life and meditation, and just started asking questions like, well, who am I really, and what does it mean? I even questioned, did I really, really want to be an actor? So I took a risk and I walked away from it for a while.
I think you were on Priest, and then there was a BBC wartime drama, Seaforth.
That's right.
And then you stopped acting for a while. What was the culmination that led to taking that break?
Well, I think, as I say, it was a couple of things, really. It was this moment of realizing that I'd achieved a lot of things, and somehow I knew deep down that more of that wasn't necessarily going to be my fulfillment. So I was getting quite clear about that you could throw an enormous amount of success at me and I wasn't necessarily going to be happy, which was interesting. And I knew that.
Very interesting.
And then the other aspect of it was, and I'm just totally frank about this, I was frightened of success. I couldn't say that to you 20 years ago. I could say that to you now, but I literally felt overwhelmed by suddenly being out of control, because it was like, I don't know how some of these young actors now who just shoot to fame handle it. They must just be very good-centered people, or some of them not. But you need a lot of self-confidence and a lot of trust in yourself, I think, to handle that amount of complexity when it's coming at you. Because to me, it was like, come here, move to LA, do this, get an agent, get a lawyer, have this, have a manager, we'll do this, do that. I couldn't see straight in it all. I literally couldn't function. And I thought, well, no one's forcing you to do this. You don't have to be an actor. So I just thought, well, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll stop. And so I did. I just put the brakes on, and I took a couple of years, and I was not stupid. I knew I had a movie, Priest at the time, that was a calling card, if you like. If I wanted to go back, I'm pretty sure I could get some work. But I just took the time, if you like, to reflect and be outside of the industry and spent a lot of time with people who knew nothing about the industry that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, at that point, was totally defined by the industry I was in. I was an actor, and I was defined by how well I was doing. And when I walked into a room, it was like I judged my value, my self-worth was valued on the work I'd done and the work I was about to do. And it just felt a very fickle and brittle and not a stable way to exist. And I didn't have the deeper confidence that I knew I needed to find.
Well, I think that, the majority of people, they cannot really relate to the complexities of celebrity or even your world as an actor. I mean, every time you're up on stage or you're up on screen, there are reviewers who are writing, did he do a good job? Did he do a bad job? Most people cannot relate to that.
Well, I don't know, Andy. I mean, let's look at you. Maybe there must be situations where you have to walk into a room and you've got to do a presentation and you're representing the company, you're representing your father and your brother and the family, and you know that you're being judged in that moment. Do you make sense? Is it landing?
That is absolutely true. And there's an element of that. But I think that when you're an actor and you have like the New York Times is writing a review.
Yeah.
Like it's just so much more public.
Yes.
That it sort of takes it into a different realm.
It's true. And I think it's taken me a long time to get to a point where I care less and less about that. And that's allowing me now just to talk, about what am I finding now, the strengths, if you like. I'm actually enjoying my 50s a lot, because you get to a point where you get over yourself a little bit and go, do you know what? It doesn't really matter if the New York Times says I stunk. I don't care. If I did what I really wanted to do, if I actually committed to what I was trying to achieve, maybe I didn't hit it. I'll learn from that. It's like you just rock and roll with it a little bit more, and you're not so caught up with what does everybody think of me, and there's a bit more freedom in that, a little bit of, you couldn't care less, which is actually is kind of what you need to do from the beginning. And I knew that as a young actor. The more you could actually say, I don't care what people think, the better you were. And the better reviews you got, actually, because you weren't trying to solicit a response. You were just doing your thing. But yes, it is challenging. I've just started on a TV show, Homeland, last week. And, there I was, first day back on the set, and producers are there. And suddenly it's like, wow, I got to deliver. And your mind's going like, whoa, did I do that good? And you've got to stay cool. You've got to stay calm, and you've got to deliver. But then, that's my job. That's what I've learned to do. And I heard this quote. I was watching the US Open the other day, and they quoted Billie Jean King saying that pressure is a privilege. And I thought, what a great quote, because I sometimes used to see pressure and balk in the face of it and step back. But now I actually see, no, if I've got pressure, then it means I'm in a privileged position to be under pressure that can make me rise up and do my best, under that pressure. And because of that pressure, and even sometimes now, I actually like a bit of pressure. I love that. Yeah, you need it. Otherwise it doesn't actually get you up to do what you need to do. So, I'm not talking about stress. That's different. I think stress is something else. I'm talking about healthy pressure, which is to do your best, be your best, and deliver. It gives you a sort of focus.
It drives you, It drives you to perform even better than you thought you may have been able to.
Absolutely. And that's where excellence lives, I think, often. And that's what I still look for in the art of acting and the craft of acting is you do a lot of work, you do a lot of study, you do a lot of research, you actually, you learn what you need to do. But in the end, the talent, or if you like, the execution of it lies in, can you just let all that go and can you just really live it? It's like, when a tennis player is hitting that volley back, they haven't got time to think about it. It's become, they put in the work, but then they're there for it. They're there for that response, and it's quicker than thought, So, you're sort of looking for that place. And that's what I love about the craft. I'm still in love with the craft of it now. I'm never bored. And I think that's what my dad has as well. He still loves it, and he's still trying to do his best, because every moment, if you're living it, for real and it's alive, then it's never old. It's never boring,
Right. It's always fresh.
Always fresh, yeah.
Linus, that experience of like peak performance, it's kind of cyclical, because it's not something that you turn on and you're just at this level all the time.
Yeah.
For example, in tennis, there are those pressure moments when it's when it's 5-4 and you're serving for the set and you have those big points.
Yeah.
For you, it's you show up at a set.
Yeah.
You show up at the set of Homeland, and you know that you need to perform the best that you can. Are there things that you do to tap into getting your mind into the right place?
Yeah, there are actually. And I think, with experience, one of the things, particularly with going back onto this job recently, I thought a lot about the role, and I thought a lot about the function of the role and the research, but I also just thought about me in that situation. I actually sort of premeditated, if you like, what I was going into. So I wasn't surprised that it was pressured. And it wasn't really that pressured. I mean, they're lovely people. They're great people, and they all want you to do well. So what am I talking about? But nevertheless, you feel under the, it's got to be good. And, when the camera turns on you and it's your turn, the pressure is on you. So it's good to sort of, if you like, you can't recreate it, but because I've been there many times, I can actually sort of close my eyes and think, well, you know what? I need to be prepared, but then I have to have the courage to just respond. And the other thing is, Andy, just to be totally frank, Sam Waterston said this to me on Law and Order one day at the very beginning, and I was really keen and trying to nail every moment. And I remember one scene, I didn't quite get it, it just wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. And Sam just turned to me and he said, you know what, you get over yourself in this job. Because you have to, because you're on to the next thing. And you can't be spending too much time focused on what just went down. that wasn't perfect. It's like try and learn from it and move on and keep that sort of fluidity as you go forward. So the preparation for me is about, I suppose, not being shocked when I walk in the room, that I kind of know the environment. And then I do little bits of prep, little bits of mind prep now, little things. Like sometimes I got a little saying in my head, something that just puts me in a zone before the camera rolls, or something like that will just get me in the right mood or the right zone, if you like, to be able to respond. And then, I have to be able to respond to who I'm working with. And when you're working with great actors, to be honest, it makes it a lot easier, because you're just with great people and you work off each other. It's not an isolated job, acting. You're working off.
It's a team sport.
Yeah, it is.
Are there any routines that you go through? Because I know that, like, I've heard interviews of golfers, for example, and when they're walking up to the green and they're going to make their putt, they actually make the same repetitions over and over again, because it's like they're turning their brain. They're trying to turn their sort of conscious brain off.
Yeah.
And it's like they put their glove into their back pocket.
Yeah.
They're going to sort of circle around the ball 2 times. Yeah. It's like, and then it's almost like in robotic mode.
Yeah. I approach each role differently. So I will have different preps for different roles. And I did a role in the UK this year, and to be honest, I didn't need to do any prep. I just needed to turn up and I needed to respond in the scene, and that was it. That's all. I learnt my lines. I knew my intentions. I knew what I wanted from the scene, all that basic stuff, but I didn't need to do anything. I did a movie this summer opposite Nicolas Cage. It was really extreme, far out, crazy, psychopathic character. One of the maddest things I've ever done. And I just needed to be so prepared to go in there. And I kind of I needed to keep myself in a place of sort of volatility almost. And I didn't want to disconnect from people on the set, but I found, I needed to be a little more isolated. And then, going on to Homeland, it's slightly different. I have a little sort of thing I say to myself at the moment. Anyway, that's what I'm doing. I say this little thing in my head before the camera rolls, and it just sort of helps me sink in and listen, because I think, the old adage, but a lot of great acting is more about great listening. So, yeah.
Can we go back to the break that you took from acting?
Sure.
I read a quote that that you said that you realized success as an actor alone wouldn't make you happy.
Yeah.
And you talked about, needing to get away from the industry and sort of look at yourself and gain confidence. How did you find that confidence, and what was your sort of spiritual path while you were away from, acting on the set?
Okay, right. Well, a lot there. I mean, without going into without going into enormous detail, I did go quite seriously into a spiritual path, which was, had an Eastern background, if you like, but it was a modern day teaching, if you like. But the focus on meditation as a vehicle to knowing oneself was a big part of it initially, anyway. So just the revelation that you're not your mind, you're not your thoughts, you're not all your feelings. I mean, they're a part of you, and they're a very beautiful and important part of you, but they don't necessarily define you. To find out for oneself, which I believe I did after many, many, many hours of meditation and many retreats and much guidance, finding access to a deeper part of oneself that is, if you like, almost beyond this world, and definitely not moved by the torrent of neurosis and self, doubt and all these things. There's something underneath that is actually profound and strong and eternal. It was quite a revelation. I mean, even as I say it to you now, I'm like, wow, did I really find that? Yes. Because the mind goes, well, did you? But yes, I did. I sort of experienced it, and I understood what many of the great wise people of this world and great sages and spiritual teachers and masters and have spoken about. Now, I personally was very interested in not just finding that knowledge or that place and experiencing it, but what does that mean in relationship to life? And I always had an instinct, even as a very, very young man in my teens, that my role wasn't to disappear into the hills and become a monk and a sage and, disappear from life, but was to be engaged in life. I always had an intuition that I was here to engage fully, and that's why I was born in the West. But I had some sort of calling, if you like, to understand these spiritual dimensions. And so the teaching and the work I was involved with became very much about, if you like, that world of being, knowing who one is beyond time, beyond thought, and then the world of evolution and time, and how do you live in the world and respond within it. And the basic conclusion, which is a very obvious one that most people probably already understand, is that you want to sort of live a life of integrity and, if you like, a full life, embracing all of life as much as one can and being humble but responsive to it. And that, if you like, to me now, this is my conclusion. I'm not involved in this particular spiritual path anymore. It takes a lot to be able to fully respond to the world we're in and not be swept up in it and caught in all of its self-concern and the neediness of it, the need, the wanting, I need more, I've not got enough. And it's hard to balance the fact that, if you're listening to this podcast, you're actually probably in a very privileged position, just simply because you're able to got time to listen to this.
And you have a smartphone.
And you have a smartphone. You know what I mean? But finding perspective on these things is really challenging. And that's, if you like, a practice in itself. And I do think there are times when maybe we do need to retreat and just, put it all down, put the phones down, and go to silence more. And I say that, and I'm not doing it enough. I'm not. I need to do it more. I did it a lot. I had a period of time where I did it a lot, so I learned a lot from that.
Are you still practicing meditation?
Not as a sort of every day I do, but yes, I meditate. But it's not the same as it used to be. I used to be, could say religious about it. I'd do 2 hours a day, or at least an hour a day. And now I do when I'll sit for periods of time. And my wife and I are now sort of trying to just find that time where you're not watching television, you're not involved in your smartphone, you're not involved in the doing, and you can just read a book and walk in nature, and all these sort of very obvious things, which seem to become harder and harder for people to do.
Very much so. And I wanted to add to what you were saying.
Yeah.
Mainly that I don't think that it is an obvious conclusion. I think that your conclusion is a beautiful one, and many of us are still struggling to figure out, like, what is life? How should one be living? And, the fact that you took time off from work, that you had the privilege to take time off of work, go to India, and really have some of this introspective experiences, and then come back to the acting world and being in Manhattan. I think that gives you some really interesting insights.
No, it certainly did. And I look back on it and extremely grateful for the whole experience. And almost, sometimes you can beat your younger self up. You know what I mean? You look back and go, oh, if I should have done this, and what a foolish young man I was. And I actually look back on that part of myself and I go, good on you. I'm very proud of you for that. Because you went and pursued something not half-heartedly. I really, really, really went to find out about it. And I found out a lot. I found out a lot about myself and the nature of ego and, these dimensions of ourselves, which are sometimes quite scary as well. And so, as you say, it was a privilege to do it, but I'm very glad I did go and do it. And now I feel more and more, I'm sort of, I suppose, integrating more understanding of what that meant in terms of being engaged in the world and responsive to the world and thankful and trying to live a life of fulfillment. And I suppose, it's again another old thing, but being grateful. You forget to be grateful. Right. I sometimes think, I haven't quite got enough because I want to have this and I need that, and I'm like, God, I've got so much, really. And it's not about even financial wealth. It is a sense of wealth in abundance in oneself. Like, for example, I think you were going to ask me at one point, I saw on a question you put down, what is success? How do you measure?
Yeah, what is success to you?
What do you measure?
How do you measure?
And I've just suddenly thought, like this year, I haven't got like an A-list movie or anything that's going to be huge, but I've done work that's been really interesting, really challenging, really creative, and very varied, and I thought, well, that actually is exactly what I wanted to have happen this year. I put it out there and I really wanted it, and somehow I got it, and I've been doing it, and it's not brought me enormous financial success, but it's brought me enough to keep going and doing what I love. And how lucky am I to be able to do that and to be able to contemplate what it all means in the midst of it. That's a very healthy and, if you like, wealthy way to be. So I'm very great. I have to remind myself to be grateful of it. That is a practice. I think that's a spiritual practice right there.
For sure, for sure. And there is a delineation between fulfillment and money. One does not guarantee the other.
Absolutely not.
And I think the idea of gratitude is a really interesting one too, because one, it really takes you to a place of being thankful and sort of being thoughtful of all the things around you.
Right on.
And I think the really interesting thing is that gratitude seems to open the doors to a lot of other opportunities. Whereas if you're not grateful, maybe it's that you're just not paying attention,
right,
and you don't see things.
Yes.
But when you're grateful, sometimes that's when the best things come. And and it's funny that it can be money related, and that's not really your intention. But
no, that
it's
absolutely no, because I mean, you need money's. It's an energy. It's something that's needed. You can't function without it. So, but how to not be caught in, very similarly to success, if you like, for me with my recognition as an actor, it was like nothing was ever going to be enough. And money can have the same thing. It's like nothing.
Same thing.
It's never enough. It's like, wow, you just start to look at that as a cycle of behavior. It's like you can get
one could have billions and billions of dollars and be like terribly unhappy and be miserable
and be a total slave. And you see someone who's got nothing and they're totally free and abundant in their. They've written great parables about that, great stories. But you sort of really appreciate that it's true. So how to have a healthy relationship to it, and I suppose using the money as well to somehow give back at times is important. I mean, I used to do a lot of that. To be frank, right now, I'll just be honest. I'm not doing a lot of that right now. I don't quite know where to put the money. It's a very challenging time we're living in, and I was trying to support political things, and I don't really know what to do. So
you're not alone, Linus. You're not alone.
Again, I know we're all struggling with that, and yet money is energy and can fuel important things. The ACLU needs money, and there's lots of different ventures and actions that need support, and there's no end to it. The majority of my emails and mail, as everybody else's, is about needing money to help make things happen. So I appreciate the power of it too, and I don't want to be scared of abundance, because you can also keep yourself, I suppose, you attract to some degree what you believe or what you want, and if you're scared of abundance, it might not come to you. So how to be able to handle abundance very lightly and with humility and not be caught by it, that's another practice right there, and one I hope that we all can be practicing.
Well, thank you. I've taken a lot of your time. I really appreciate you sharing your your career and your thoughts and your spirituality with our listeners. I just have two quick questions. One, you mentioned that on the topic of fulfillment, it's like you put things out there. It sounds like you're setting your goals for the year or beyond. Do you write them down, or is it mental?
Well, that particular one was just a very mental one, and I thought about it quite a bit. I didn't write it down, but I do remember saying it to a few people, only people very close to me. I don't know how many, to be honest, but somehow literally putting it out there in the universe. And it was like it literally felt like an intention, and I hadn't done that for a long time, but I remember thinking I need, I'd spent 3 years in a show that's been a wonderful show called Vikings, and it was a fantastic period for me being in this show and having a wonderful role, and it's seen by a lot of people, but it's not a mega audience. And I just thought I need now to find more variety, and I need to I only want to be in things that I really want to see, and I don't want to just be taking the next best thing. And that was going to mean a risk. It was going to mean that I might not earn the amount of money. It might mean big life changes. And I thought about it enough to say, I'm prepared to pay the cost for that. If that's what it means, I'm prepared to pay the cost. If it means we have to tighten the budget or sell something, I'll do it, because that's actually what I want. And so I put that out. I put it out to my manager. I did write it in terms of an email, and I did put it to my agents, and then I just kept hoping. I put it out there and kept hoping, and I look.
I think
back
that's the mindset of a real artist.
I don't know. I'm actually sort of slightly amazed myself. I look back on the year and go, wow, that happened. And there were a couple of things that I actually, if you like, I hustled for. There was a movie that I did earlier this year, and it was like a bucket list movie for me. I got to work with some of my Hollywood heroes, Samuel Jackson and William Hurt and Peter Fonda and Chris Plummer, amazing people. And it wasn't a huge role, but I basically courted that role with the director until he gave me the role. And then there was a scheduling issue with another show I had. And I had, at one point, it looked like I was going to have to choose between one and the other. And I did. I had to choose, and I had to let that movie go because I'd already committed to the other. And then I just had to hope that everything worked out. And eventually the two productions worked it out for me to do both. And so it did happen. Could do both.
Wow.
But you have to take risks, and you've also got to be loyal at times. I couldn't, as much as I wanted to do that movie, I couldn't keep the other company waiting. I'd already said I'd do the job, and I had to sort of say, okay, I'm going to have to lose it. That's fair enough. I'll let it go. And lo and behold, it came back. So I don't know how these things work, Andy. It's a mysterious universe. But I do believe our intention has a role in it, because we're part of this mysterious universe. So if we are clear in what we want and focused, I think it's not sort of woo-woo stuff. You basically are bringing things into being. You build it in your mind, you build it in your ideas and your ideology and your mindset, and you start to move towards it. Your energies start to go towards it. It's not like it's literally just happening, like some being from the sky just came and manifested it for you. You drove it. You sort of brought it into being. It makes sort of sense to me in some way.
Right. I love that. We are only mere human beings. I don't think we're expected to understand it. We just have to embrace the journey.
Exactly, man. Exactly. Embrace the journey.
Do the best that we can.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Linus.
Thank
Where
you.
can the Inspired Money listeners find you?
Well, it's funny. Nowhere. Because somewhere in the universe. I'm terrible. I have not cottoned on to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of these things. I mean, if they really, really want to get a hold of me, email you and send them on to me if people want to talk to me. But I mean, maybe I should be doing all that stuff, but I've just not been kind of very savvy at it all, and I find it a bit intrusive, so I don't really do that.
There's a balance. There's a sacrifice to be made. I mean, on one hand, you could have like direct contact and feedback with your fans and people who like your work and the programs that you're on. But on the other hand, I think it's very likely that you'd have a lot less time of you and your wife just enjoying a book.
Well, exactly. And I think, if things got to a place where, I had the need for like a personal assistant and that kind of thing, then I could imagine sort of running all that side of it, because you'd portion out your day and you'd spend a couple of hours just dealing with all that and responding to people, and that's cool. And I like responding to people. I try to respond to everybody who contacts me, but I find messaging and emails quite enough.
Yep. Well, thank you, Linus.
Thank you.
We really look forward to watching you on Homeland. I enjoyed watching you at the end of last season and look forward to what's in store.
Well, there's plenty of intrigue, I can promise you that.
Never a boring moment.
Never a boring moment.
Watching that show gets me a little tense.
Yeah. Well, I'm not watching it anymore because I'm in it, but it used to make me tense too. Yeah.
Thank you, Linus.
Thank you, Andy.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. What were your favorite Inspired Money moments? Man, I almost don't know where to start. Number one, I love that Linus never wanted to be beholden to anybody else. that made him industrious as a child and carried him through as he committed to his acting career. I found it fascinating that he was frightened by success and overwhelmed by the complexities that success brought to his life. To achieve a lot and then question if it's enough, we sometimes see this in sports. Once a person reaches number one in the world, it can be a struggle because more success does not guarantee fulfillment or happiness. That led Linus to explore the spiritual aspect of life, and for him that meant meditation. He was seeking how to be more centered, self-confident, and how to trust himself. His Law & Order co-star Sam Waterston said, "You know what? You get over yourself in this job." Great advice. And another important thing is to not care about what people think. Just do your thing. With inspired money, money can fuel important things. Appreciate the power of it. Don't be scared or afraid of abundance. Linus's conclusion to his spiritual quest is a beautiful thing. To live a life of integrity and to have a full life. To embrace life while being humble and to love your craft. Coming up next time on Inspired Money.
And my buddy wanted to go to Wall Street too. But the thing was that he actually got a job offer from Wall Street. And I got no job offers, period, let alone from Wall Street. And I didn't understand how that was possible because I did everything quote unquote right. And I was expecting that therefore I should be delivered the goods. I should have a job offer from places like Wall Street. But my fraternity brother did everything quote unquote wrong and still got there.
That's Kyle Winey, author of the book Hackiversity, The Secrets to Achieving More by Doing Less in College. If you're a student or you know one, you won't want to miss this next episode. Before you go, I just want to thank everyone who's rated and reviewed this podcast on iTunes. If you like this show, the best thing you can do to help us is to subscribe, rate, and review by going to inspiredmoney.fm/iTunes. Send me an email with your iTunes username, and I'll add you to a drawing to win cool prizes. All the music on today's show is by Jim Kimo West. Mahalo, Kimo. Want to be an inspired moneymaker? Do something that scares you. Do something that's going to make you better. Do something to give back in a bigger way to the world. Tweet me or email what you're doing. Until next time, find your inspiration and run with it.